VEDA Day 30. Good morning, Internet citizens. Bill Corley here. Today is a continuation of yesterday's vlog. Yesterday I began a conversation about how basically dispute resolution and things of that nature would work in a situation where we weren't under the rule of bands of armed men. And in yesterday's conversation I really talked about how most people would get along in such an environment. You know, folks like you and I who generally get up and go about our days in the productive service of other people as the way of making our own living. But a valid question comes up. What about the criminals and sociopaths? What about the people who basically don't follow whatever set of rules there are? They don't follow the laws today, and therefore they're not going to follow these conventions or rules or whatever in a society without bands of armed men ruling us. So let's start with the worst case. Let's talk about murderers. Unfortunately, there will always be murderers in the world, and we'll have to find a way to effectively deal with them. So we try to break this apart a little bit. In the first case, in the absence of bands of armed men ruling us, there's no such thing as public property, in the sense that all property everywhere is owned by somebody. And one of the parts of property ownership is the right to exclude people from your property. In other words, the right to personally enforce trespass, and if need be, to enforce it at the point of a gun. So, you know, similar to how it is in many states, including Texas where I live today, if someone intrudes upon your property and you feel in danger because of that, well, then you can use deadly force and kill that person. So I remind everybody that, and this would be the case this is the case in all societies, that ultimately the primary means of self-defense is yourself. Now, as I said in a prior video, even in our society today, the police are under no obligation to help you. But let's say that what's happened then is not that. You come home one day and you see someone fleeing the area of your home. You get a license plate number, maybe. You don't really think too much about it. You walk inside your house. You see family members dead. You make the connection. Now what? There's been a murder, and you have some idea of who's responsible. What's to be done about it? And I guess I would break the what's to be done about it really into two questions. What's to be done about the person, the criminal? And then number two, what's to be done to make you, the victim, whole? Now, in the case of murder, you know, there's no way to make the significant other of a murder victim entirely whole. But there is this question of restitution. So we try to tackle those separately, because I honestly believe they are generally separate issues. So in the first case, what to do about the other person? Well, there's investigation and the determination of the identity of the guilty party. What I'm imagining is that that activity typically is undertaken by your crime insurance company. Yes, you heard me right, crime insurance. I assume that the way this would work is that as an adjunct to the insurance that you have on your personal property today, that one of the riders for that insurance is insurance against violent and property crime. And so I would then expect that you would contact your crime insurance company. They would send an investigator over, take your statement, and begin an investigation. I would assume that this investigation would be far more efficient than a government investigation, primarily because what's important to the investigator is the positive identification of the criminal, and really not any other sort of, political objectives. So, okay, so investigation goes on, the murderer is identified. Again, since I use the example of murder, because I'm just going to assume that the murderer isn't going to respond to any kind of, standard summons or process. Well, then at this point, your crime insurance people would bring the case to a recognized and observed third-party adjudicator. And granted, you can't have entirely an adversarial process without anybody advocating on behalf of the defendant, but certainly a preliminary finding of fact can be had, and proof of notice that the accused had the opportunity to defend themselves, declined to do so. Well, now I imagine that, again, since all property is private, these agencies and bureaus and everybody talk to one another. So it would be pretty clear pretty quickly, be easy to get the name, the description, the other identifiable facts about the accused murderer out there. So he's now not just accused, he's been tried in absentia, found guilty, or found responsible probably would be the better word. Well, most people aren't going to allow entry to that person. I mean, it's in most people's interest to know who the murderers around them are and to refuse them entry. I mean, it's likely this gentleman's going to get shot, quite frankly. You have a known murderer out there who refuses to turn themselves over for justice. So I think life becomes very difficult for that person. It's not just social shunning, it's the active refusal to allow this person on your property. Now, if he has property, it might be the active refusal to allow him to exit that property. Now, this issue of roads and egress and access and right-of-way is an entirely different issue that I'm not going to go into today. It's a rich issue. But I think it becomes increasingly impossible for this person to do anything but lead an underground existence, moving in the shadows from one place to another, hopeful that he's never going to be caught and shot. The alternative, of course, would be to turn himself over to justice. I imagine that in the absence of states, there would still be jails and prisons, other sorts of places like that, where ultimately it's the desire of the accused to be able to live a normal life that draws him to these places where he can declare who he is and open himself up to the due process of law, because it's either that or ultimately to be shot as a murderous trespasser on somebody else's property. I'm happy to hear feedback on that part of my thought, but I'd now like to move to the other part of the thought, because it's not done there. What about restitution? Now, in the case of murder, like I said, there's no 100% restitution for murder or for many other violent crimes. There's restitution for property crimes, obviously, but really not for violent crimes in the same way. But that said, I can imagine that as part of your crime insurance, that just like you can get compensated monetarily if your car is totaled, even though you can't get that car back, I would imagine that if your family was the victim of a murder or an assault or rape or some other violent crime of that sort, then there would be some monetary restitution, that would help, pay for burial, help pay for therapy, help pay for any sort of physical accommodations, any long-term injury, medical expenses, that sort of thing. So I would imagine that you yourself on your own insurance rider would have some kind of a clause that would provide you with some kind of compensation. Now, in the case where this is property crime, I think the issue becomes easier. An assessment can be made of the value of the item stolen. Now that can be paid out to you, just like when you're just like if you were rear-ended in a car, right? Then you're going to get paid out for that, and then it's going to be up ultimately to your insurance company to contact the insurance company, the victim, the perpetrator rather, and arrange for a transfer of funds. I would imagine that it would be the same case in a sense of a property crime. I mean, obviously, that's the other reason why it behooves the investigating agency or the investigating whether it's a subdivision of your crime insurance company or another third party that they contract with or that you contract with, that it behooves them then to move with all due speed and actually find the person that's responsible, because then that begins the process of getting paid back for their efforts in finding that person. So again, the rogues, the murderers, the sociopaths may refuse to just participate in this system of restorative justice, but the refusal to participate, the refusal to defend oneself in what these private proceedings would be, will create in most people's minds prima facie evidence of guilt. And since private property ultimately is controlled individually, then the rogue outlaw really has a hard time eating, sleeping, finding work, that kind of thing. I mean, who'd want this guy working for them? So those are sort of the two ways that I think this would work out, both in hunting the person down who is the criminal and the rogue, and frankly, preventing, in as far as possible, them from victimizing further people, and also making the crime victim whole. I'd be interested to hear your comments on that general outline. Clearly, more can be said. Now, before I sign off today, the additional thing that I'd like to talk about is, well, this is day 30. So I've been doing this vlog every day in April, this VEDA thing, and I think with the exception of the first video that just failed to process by YouTube, and I did it via direct upload so I couldn't recover it, and a couple of days here and there when I was sort of constrained by travel, the circumstances of travel, I think I've done a pretty good job with this. And I've enjoyed it. I can't say that there's I have been rewarded with thousands of views and hundreds of comments yet. That's not, in fact, the case. But I'm heartened by words of encouragement that other vloggers with those kinds of numbers have put out there, that it always starts slowly, and that vlogging to some extent is like writing. You're a writer if you actually write, right? A writer writes, and so therefore a vlogger vlogs. And that, well, I'll look back at some of these early efforts in the future and say, whew, thank God not a whole lot of people were watching. Because see, that was an and I'm really trying to get rid of the ums. It's difficult when you're trying to think literally on your feet walking. See, there was another one. But that's the attempt. So this is not the end. I'm looking at the 30 days of VEDA as really the beginning. So I'm going to rename this. I'm going to call this little adventure, I'm going to call it the morning walk with Bill Corley. How about that? I'm not sure if it will be every day. It will be most days. How about that? It will be most days, and I will do my best to try to find something interesting to talk about. And you can help me out by commenting below in the doobly-doo and telling me what you think about what I've said and what you'd like to hear more about. And my promise to you is that I will make a video on anything that you comment on. I think that's fair that I can make that promise, given the current number of viewers and subscribers. I will reconsider the nature of that promise if I get to the point to where I get hundreds of suggestions or things like that, but I don't think I'm in any danger of that anytime soon. So, please, if you at all like what you're hearing, please hit the subscribe button, and if you would like to ask me questions, tell me that I'm full of shit, to give me a suggestion for another video, please put those comments down below and I will do my best. And that's it for me today. So, be kind to one another. Bye.